Hey there, it's Recue here. I'm really out of my comfort zone at the moment. I really haven't done any of these me talking to the camera videos, but there's a first to everything, and this first one goes to Andrew Huang. If you followed any music tech related YouTube, you've most likely bumped into Andrew Huang's channel and his awesome 4 producers, 1 sample videos. If you haven't, the concept is fairly simple. 4 producers each take the same sample, everyone produces a track, and then you get to hear 4 different takes around the same subject and the same source. Good stuff. I really like the concept, and I'm glad to let you know that Andrew asked me to contribute on 1 episode. And what makes it even more juicy for me is that the sample was provided by none other than Mr. Jamie Lidell. And what Mr. Lidell provided was this.
I cannot hold you anymore. So am I next to close the door. There was a road.
The other producers in the episode were awesomely talented Laura Escudé, Flux Pavilion, and of course, Andrew himself. We each had our own take on the subject, and mine was that I wanted to use only that sample for all of the sounds you hear on the track. You can check out the full episode on Andrew's channel. I've provided the link below. All the tracks are there. This is more of the detailed breakdown of my own track. Let's do it the other way around and hear the track first, and then get to the techie breakdown after that. If you happen to like the track, it's available on my Bandcamp, it's available on Spotify, Apple Music, and whatnot. You have the links below. So let's get to it.
Straight in. Here we go.
Sick sound design already.
I cannot hold you anymore.
In a murky, underwater cave.
This is how I was feeling last night.
Next to close the door.
Really deep bass.
So vibey.
Here we go. You know this is ramping.
No, it's just coming. You know.
Okay, I don't know what's coming next. I'm saying flutes. Flutes! Ah!
Yes.
Sounds are razor sharp.
So wet. Those drums. Nice.
We're out of the cave. Oh!
This is the Recue I'm used to.
So squelchy, but precise as well. So yeah, it's a good sound.
That soulful robot vibe.
Love these chords coming in, these little melodic things, dark melodic stuff. That is totally my vibe.
Even with all that busyness, you've got that touchstone of emotion.
How is it possible to have this many laser beam sounds and for the mix to still be so clean?
So tight.
It's ridiculously tight.
Okay. Break it down a little bit.
That little arp is amazing. I'm like an arp connoisseur, and yeah, that's a good one.
Oh. You know I'm a sucker for those grains.
No, it's really immersive. Feels like I'm involved in this entire experience.
That is a mood. That is a serious mood.
Ooh, incredible. Just such good sound design.
Very cool. Very cool indeed.
Okay, so basically the first thing I did was I imported the sample into Isotopes RX, which lets you process it in spectral domain, and I separated the vocals from the violin and the guitar, and I got these samples.
Hold you anymore. So am I next to close the door.
There are a little bit of artifacts in the processing as the layers have overlapping spectral content, but it's okay as you can hide it quite well in musical context. Then I imported those into this little box here, which is the Tasty Chip GR1 granular synth. This is a pretty cool device. I've been, to be honest, obsessing with it lately. It has up to 128 grains. So once you start ramping up the granular density and the grain size, you can build things pretty big. You can take a small sound and grow it to a huge wall of sound quite quickly. But you can of course do the usual granular kind of stuttering and stretching and mangling with this one as well. So you can scan the waveform however you want and turn it into an instrument. I then took this output and fed it through the modular. The main modules I used were Clouds, a bit of Pico DSP in there that's off the rack at the moment, and Scooper as well. I just basically did a half an hour session feeding everything through everything and then recording it into Ableton and then chopping and selecting the good bits from there. But to be honest, then I kind of started thinking that I'm trying to be a bit too clever with the material, doing all sorts of DSP trickery and whatever I can come up with. So I took the engineer hat off for a second and started thinking melodies and chord progressions. So what I did next was just loaded simply the violin into Simpler and turned that into a pad. Very simple stuff. A small loop of the violin through a bandpass filter and a reverb. And then I improvised this long chord progression over the vocals with it. I then doubled that by loading the vocals into Ableton's wavetable and tweaking something that fills the lower register, and then adding a bit of reverb to make it wider. So it adds up this warm second layer. And then with the same method, I added these small details here and there by finding a nice higher pitched tone from the same wavetable. I added some backwards convolution reverb on it, so these little droplets of Jamie keep bouncing back and forth. And now that we have this nice blanket of sound, I wanted a focal point that would carry on throughout the track. And that is this little ARP, yet again from the same vocal wavetable, and alone it sounds like this. But once you add this little thing on it, which is the Valhalla Supermassive, it turns into quite something else. I absolutely love this plugin. It turns this simple ARP into this kind of pulsing, evolving chord. At this point, I kind of felt that the intro was missing the low end, so I wanted to build a bass. So for the bass, I loaded the vocals into Native Instruments Form, which is a granular sampler, but it takes the concept a bit further with the oscillator effects. They allow you to shape the sound quite drastically. Let's first play the bass as is, and then I'll peel it back to a human form so you can hear how it's done. It's basically just Jamie's voice pitched way down and then filtered and distorted. It sounds like this. And once you start peeling back the layers of effects, you'll notice that there is a human somewhere underneath. And all of these elements combined with the granular stuff from the GR1 make the intro of the track. Okay, then the more tricky part, which is the drums. No offense, Jamie, but your voice is not really made for drums, but I did my best. I started laying down the beats with the bass drum. It's done pretty much the same way as the bass, which is by loading the sample into form. I'm using a pitch envelope and a filter envelope to make it kind of kick, and then I'm really smacking it with a compressor. It really doesn't sound like a human at first, but let's go backwards again. I have used the additive oscillator, so you can argue whether it's 100% of the original sample, but there's ton of effects anyway, so nah. So it's largely the FM that's bringing the grit and the texture here. And there you go. And it's the same thing with the rest of the drums. We could start going through each and every one of them, but I really don't see the point because the method is pretty much the same with all of them. I'm using a pitch envelope and in most cases an FM envelope to get it sharp. Trying to find different tones with the formant and playing around with effects after that. Basically just repeating the same method, Jamie's voice transformed into all of this. Then there's one layer of random bleeps and bloops from the modular recording, and one simpler that plays random chops of the vocal, and another simpler which plays an ARP that's forced to a scale and auto-tuned. And all of these elements combined create the main beat. And now that the track had kind of reached its high point, I wanted to start bringing the chord progressions back up again and then building melodies on top of that. So I took this wavetable that I used in the beginning for the little details and played this melody over the chords. And then, as the track still kind of felt empty, I added one more layer, which is something I very rarely do, and that is the vocoder. I don't think I've ever done this classic kind of vocoder thing, so I wasn't too sure about it, to be honest. I felt it was a bit cheesy, but kind of nice anyway, so I toned it down a bit. It's quite subtle in there in the mix, so you're kind of thinking, is it a vocoder or is it not a vocoder? But alone it sounds like this. And once all of those elements were in place, it was time to kind of start bringing things down and wrapping things up by returning to the beginning and introducing the vocals again, kind of closing the loop by returning to the beginning. And that's pretty much it. I hope you guys like it.